The summer of 2025 in Willow Creek, Virginia, was a furnace, and my ancient air conditioner wheezed its last breath on the hottest day of the year. Sweat dripped down my temples as I stared at the lifeless unit, cursing my luck. Then he walked in, Ethan, the repair guy, with eyes like a storm and a grin that promised trouble. I called the local HVAC service in a panic, expecting some grizzled technician with a toolbox and a grunt. Instead, Ethan Harper stepped through my door, all lean muscle and easy confidence, his white t-shirt clinging to his frame in a way that made my pulse stutter. He was maybe 25, like me, with dark brown hair curling at the edges and a jawline that could cut glass. "Looks like you're in a bit of a hot spot," he said, his voice low and teasing, and I swear the room got 10 degrees warmer. I'm Lucas Bennett, a graphic designer who'd moved to this sleepy suburb to escape the chaos of DC life, hoping for quiet and maybe a fresh start. But quiet was hard to come by when your AC died in a heat wave, and now here was Ethan, kneeling by my unit, his hands moving with a kind of grace that made it impossible to look away. I offered him a glass of iced tea, mostly to distract myself from the way his shoulders flexed as he worked. "You live here alone?" he asked, glancing up, his gray eyes catching the light. There was no judgment in his tone, just curiosity, but it hit me like a spotlight. I nodded, muttering something about freelancing and liking the solitude. But the truth was messy, eh? I'd left DC after a breakup that gutted me. Mark, my first real love, who'd walked out when I pushed for something more serious. Since then, I'd kept my heart locked up tighter than Fort Knox. Ethan didn't push, just nodded and went back to his tools. But as he worked, he hummed softly, a low, soulful tune that felt like it was pulling at something deep inside me. I leaned against the counter, watching him, wondering how someone could make wrench-turning look like art. "You're good at this," I said, trying to sound casual. He chuckled, wiping sweat from his brow. "Been fixing things since I was a kid. Grew up in a house where something was always broken." There was a flicker of something in his voice, maybe pain, maybe pride. I wanted to ask, but I didn't. Instead, I handed him the tea, our fingers brushing for a split second. It was nothing, really, but my skin burned where we touched. By the time he finished, the AC was humming again, cool air flooding the house. I expected him to pack up and leave, but he lingered, leaning against the wall, sipping the tea like he had nowhere else to be. "You ever get lonely out here?" he asked, and this time, his eyes held mine, searching. I froze. The question wasn't just small talk. It was a key turning in a lock I'd bolted shut. Sometimes, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "You?" He shrugged, but his gaze didn't waver. "Yeah, more than I'd like to admit." There was a weight to his words, like he was offering me a piece of himself, raw and unfiltered. I didn't know what to do with it, so I just stood there, the air between us crackling with something I couldn't name. That night, after he left, I couldn't sleep. His number was scrawled on the receipt he'd left behind, and I stared at it like it was a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to solve. I'd spent months building walls around my heart, but Ethan's easy smile and quiet questions had slipped through the cracks like sunlight. I didn't know it yet, but that moment was the spark that would set my world ablaze. The next morning, I found an excuse to call him. The AC was acting funny. I lied, my heart pounding as I dialed. He showed up within the hour, that same grin lighting up my porch. "Miss me already?" he teased, and I laughed, too loud, too nervous. He didn't call me out on the lie, just out of work, but this time he talked more about growing up in a small town nearby, about his dad who'd never approved of anything he did, about how fixing things was his way of making sense of a world that often felt broken. I listened, hanging on every word, and before I knew it, we were sitting on my back porch, the sun dipping low, casting everything in gold. He told me about the time he rebuilt an old radio just to hear his mom's favorite song again, and I told him about the art I made when I couldn't sleep, bright, chaotic pieces that hid the ache I carried. We were strangers, but it didn't feel like it. It felt like we'd known each other forever. As the fireflies started to flicker, He leaned closer, his voice soft. You ever feel like you're waiting for something, but you don't know what it is? I nodded, my throat tight. His hand rested on the bench between us, inches from mine, and I wanted to close the gap, but fear held me back. Mark's voice echoed in my head. You're too much, Lucas. Too intense. I pulled back, breaking the moment. Ethan didn't push. He just smiled, like he understood, and said, I'll check on that AC again tomorrow, just to be sure. I watched him drive away, my heart a tangled mess of hope and terror. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew one thing. Ethan Harper was trouble, the kind that could change everything. The next few days were a blur of Ethan's visits, each one stretching longer than the last. He'd tinker with the AC, claiming it needed fine-tuning, but we both knew it was an excuse. We'd end up on the porch again, talking about everything and nothing. Music, dreams, the way the stars looked brighter out here than in the city. His laugh was like a melody I couldn't get out of my head, and every time our eyes met, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, desperate to jump, but terrified of the fall. Willow Creek wasn't exactly a haven for guys like me. I'd seen the looks at the grocery store, the whispers when I wore my rainbow pin to the coffee shop. I learned to keep my head down, to blend in. But Ethan didn't seem to care about blending in. He wore his confidence like a second skin, and it made me want to be braver, to be more like him. Still, I kept my distance, afraid of what might happen if I let myself get too close. One afternoon, he showed up with a toolbox and a story about a dog he'd rescued from the side of the road. Named him Rusty, he said, pulling out his phone to show me a picture of Scruffy, mutt with soulful eyes. He's a mess, but he's mine. There was a tenderness in his voice that made my chest ache. I wanted to ask if he'd ever let someone else into his messy, beautiful world, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I invited him to stay for dinner. It was impulsive, reckless even, but the idea of him leaving made my stomach twist. He said yes without hesitation, and soon we were in my kitchen, chopping vegetables and bumping shoulders as we moved around the cramped space. It felt domestic, intimate, like we were building something together. When he reached past me for a knife, his arm brushed mine, and I froze, every nerve in my body alive with the contact. You okay? He asked, his voice soft, his eyes searching mine. I nodded, but my heart was racing. I wanted to tell him how he made me feel, like I was waking up after years of sleepwalking, but fear clamped down on the words. Instead, I focused on the food, stirring the pasta sauce with more intensity than it needed. Dinner was a revelation. Ethan ate like he lived, fully, unapologetically, savoring every bite. He told me about his dream to open his own repair shop, to fix things for people who couldn't afford it otherwise. I want to make a difference, even if it's just one broken fridge at a time. His passion was infectious, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. After dinner, we sat on the couch, a movie playing in the background that neither of us watched. The air was thick with unspoken words, and when his knee brushed mine, I didn't pull away. Lucas, he said, his voice low, what are you so afraid of? The question hit me like a punch. I wanted to lie, to say I wasn't afraid, but his eyes held mine, and I couldn't look away. I don't know how to do this, I admitted, my voice breaking. The last time I let someone in, it broke me. I told him about Mark, about the nights I'd spent wondering what I'd done wrong, about the walls I'd built to keep from getting hurt again. Ethan listened, his face unreadable, and when I finished, he didn't say anything. He just reached for my hand, his fingers warm and steady against mine. You're not broken, Lucas, he said finally. You're just waiting for the right person to see you. His thumb brushed over my knuckles, and I felt like I was falling, like the ground was slipping out from under me. I wanted to kiss him, to close the distance between us, but the fear was still there, whispering that this was too good to be true. He left that night with a promise to come back, and I spent hours staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment. The next day, he showed up with Rusty in tow, the dog bounding into my yard like he owned it. We spent the afternoon playing fetch, laughing as Rusty tripped over his own paws. It was so easy, so natural, that I almost forgot to be scared. But Willow Creek had a way of reminding you who you were. That evening, as we walked Rusty down the street, a neighbor, an older man with a permanent scowl, stared at us, his eyes narrowing. "Faggots," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for us to hear. I froze, my heart pounding, but Ethan just squeezed my hand, his grip firm and unwavering. "Don't let him win," he whispered, his voice fierce. "You're worth more than his hate." I wanted to believe him, but the word lingered, sharp and poisonous, cutting into the fragile hope I'd started to build. Ethan didn't let go, though, and as we walked back to my house, his hand in mine felt like a lifeline. The neighbor's words haunted me, but Ethan's presence was a counterweight, pulling me back from the edge. Over the next week, he became a fixture in my life, showing up with coffee, fixing things I hadn't even noticed were broken, filling my quiet house with laughter and warmth. I started to let my guard down, but the fear never fully left. Willow Creek was small, and small towns had long memories. One night, Ethan invited me to his place, a modest apartment on the edge of town. It was cluttered but cozy, with tools scattered across the table and Rusty sprawled on a worn couch. "Welcome to my castle," he said with a grin, and I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. He cooked us tacos, and we ate on the floor, Rusty begging for scraps. It was perfect, but perfection made me nervous. After dinner, he pulled out an old guitar, strumming a soft melody that filled the room. "My mom taught me," he said, his voice quiet. "She was the only one who ever got me." He didn't elaborate, but the sadness in his eyes told me there was a story there, one he wasn't ready to share. I wanted to ask, but instead I just listened, letting the music wrap around us like a blanket. When he finished, he set the guitar down and looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Lucas, I need to tell you something." My heart sank, bracing for the worst. He took a deep breath. "I'm not just passing through. I like you. A lot. And I think you like me too, but you're scared and I get it. I'm scared too." His honesty floored me. I wanted to tell him he was right, that I was falling for him, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I leaned forward and kissed him. It was tentative at first, like testing the waters, but then he kissed me back, and it was like a dam breaking. His hands found my face, pulling me closer, and for the first time in forever, I felt alive. We didn't sleep together that night, just kissed and talked until the sun came up, sharing pieces of ourselves we'd kept hidden. He told me about his dad, a man who'd thrown him out at 17 for being gay, and how he'd built a life despite it. I told him about my parents, who loved me, but didn't understand me, and how I'd always felt like I was running from something. But the world outside his apartment wasn't as kind. The next day, we went to a local diner, and the stares were unmistakable. A group of guys at the counter muttered something as we passed, and I felt Ethan tense beside me. "Ignore them," he said, but his jaw was tight. We ate quickly, the joy of the previous night dimmed by the weight of their judgment. Back at my place, I couldn't shake the unease. "Doesn't it bother you?" I asked, pacing the living room. "The way people look at us." "It bothers me," he admitted, sitting on the couch, Rusty at his feet. "But I've learned to live with it. You can't let their hate define you." His words were steady, but I saw the flicker of pain in his eyes, and it broke something in me. I wanted to be as strong as he was, but I wasn't there yet. That night, I had a nightmare. Mark's voice, the neighbor's slur, a chorus of disapproval drowning me out. I woke up gasping, and when Ethan called the next morning, I didn't answer. I told myself I needed space, but really I was running again, hiding behind my walls. He showed up anyway, knocking on my door with a worried frown. "Talk to me, Lucas," he said, stepping inside. "Don't shut me out." I tried to explain, but the words came out jumbled, a mess of fear and doubt. He listened, patient as always, and when I finished, he pulled me into a hug. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, his voice fierce. "But you have to decide if you're in this with me." I wanted to say yes, but the fear was still there, clawing at me. I nodded instead, hoping it was enough. He stayed, and we spent the day together, but the tension lingered. I knew I had to make a choice. let him in or let him go. But choosing meant risking everything, and I wasn't sure I was ready. The choice weighed on me like a storm cloud. Ethan was patient, but I could see the strain in his eyes, the way he watched me when he thought I wasn't looking. I wanted to be the person he saw, someone brave, someone worthy, but every time I got close, the fear pulled me back. Willow Creek wasn't helping. The whispers followed us everywhere, and I started to notice Ethan's truck parked at my place, drawing more than a few raised eyebrows. One evening, we went to a local fair, hoping for a night of normalcy. The air smelled of cotton candy and popcorn, and for a while, it felt like we were just two guys enjoying a date. We shared a Ferris wheel ride, the world shrinking below us, and when he kissed me at the top, it was like the stars were cheering us on. But as we walked through the crowd, I caught a familiar face, my neighbor, the one who'd spat that ugly word. He was with a group, their eyes locked on us, and I felt my stomach drop. "Let's go," I whispered, tugging Ethan's arm. He didn't argue, but I could tell it hurt him, the way I shrank from the world. Back at my place, he was quiet, and I hated myself for it. "I'm trying," I said, my voice cracking. "It's just hard." "I know," he said, his hand on mine. "But I need you to try for us, not just for you." His words were gentle but firm, and they cut deeper than I expected. I nodded, but the doubt lingered. Could I be what he needed? Could I face a town that didn't want us? The next day, I got a call from my mom. She'd heard rumors, she said, about me and that repair guy. Her voice was kind but cautious, urging me to be careful, to think about my future. "This town isn't like D.C., she said, and I wanted to scream that I knew, that I felt it every day. I hung up, my hands shaking, and when Ethan showed up, I couldn't hide my frustration. "Maybe this was a mistake," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. His face fell. I wanted to take it back, but the fear was louder. "I don't know if I can do this, Ethan. Not here." He didn't yell or storm out. He just looked at me, his eyes raw with hurt. "I thought you were stronger than this," he said quietly. "But if you're not ready, I can't make you be." He left, and the silence he left behind was deafening. I spent the night pacing, torn between running after him and hiding forever. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. It was from Ethan, just a few lines. "I'm not giving up on you, Lucas, but you need to fight for this too. I'll be at the shop if you change your mind." I held the note like it was a lifeline, my heart pounding. I knew what I wanted, but the cost felt too high. I spent the day in a fog, my work forgotten, my thoughts consumed by him. By evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to his shop, a small garage on the outskirts of town. He was there, working on a busted heater, his hands steady, but his face tired. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm scared, but I don't want to lose you." He set down his tools, his eyes searching mine. "Then don't," he said simply. He pulled me into his arms, and I let myself fall, let the fear slip away, if only for a moment. We kissed, and it was like coming home. But the world wasn't done with us. As we stood there, a brick crashed through the shop's window, glass shattering around us. A note was tied to it, scrawled in angry letters, "Get out of our town." Ethan's face hardened, but he didn't let go of me. "We're not running," he said, his voice steady. "Not anymore." The brick was a wake-up call, a reminder that love in a place like Willow Creek came with a fight. Ethan called the police, but their response was lukewarm. A quick report, a promise to look into it, and a suggestion to keep a low profile. I saw the frustration in Ethan's eyes, but also the fire. He wasn't backing down, and for the first time, I didn't want to either. We cleaned up the glass together, Rusty whining at our feet, and as we worked, I felt something shift inside me. I was done hiding. I was done letting fear win. "I'm in," I told Ethan, my voice steady. "All the way." He smiled, a real smile, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. The next week was a battle. We reported the vandalism, but the whispers grew louder, the stares sharper. Ethan's shop lost a few clients, and my freelance work took a hit when a local business canceled the contract, citing community concerns. But we didn't let it break us. We leaned on each other, spending nights planning his dream repair shop, sketching logos for my art, dreaming of a future where we didn't have to look over our shoulders. One night, we held a small gathering at my place, friends from D.C., a couple of locals who'd stood by us. It was risky, but it felt right. We laughed, ate, and danced under the stars, Rusty chasing fireflies. When Ethan pulled me close, whispering, "I love you," I said it back without hesitation. It was the first time I'd ever said those words and meant them completely. The turning point came at a town meeting. Someone had proposed a community standards ordinance, a thinly veiled attempt to push people like us out. Ethan stood up, his voice clear and strong, and told our story, not just the love, but the hate, the brick, the whispers. I joined him, my hands shaking but my resolve firm, and spoke about wanting to belong, to live without fear. The room was silent, then a few people clapped, then more. Not everyone, but enough. The ordinance failed, and while Willow Creek didn't change overnight, it was a start. Ethan's shop slowly regained clients, and I found new ones, people who saw our courage and respected it. We weren't just surviving anymore, we were living. Months later, we sat on my porch, Rusty asleep at our feet, the air cool with the promise of fall. Ethan's hand was in mine, his thumb tracing lazy circles on my skin. "You fixed more than my AC," I said, my voice thick with emotion. He laughed, pulling me close, and, as we kissed under the stars, I knew we'd built something unbreakable. Our love wasn't just a spark, it was a fire, one that burned through fear and hate to light up the darkest corners of our world. Willow Creek might never fully accept us, but we'd carved out a place for ourselves, a home where we could be free. And that was enough.